Well, thank you. Just make sure. So I want to thank Betsy and the museum for having me and letting me come in and do this unusual way of presenting. I guess I have a few different elements, so I'm going to be like, it's a little clumsy. So I chose the artwork by Lorna Simpson and Wendy Red Star to interact with, and I guess part of what struck me about both of these artworks were they're very much about photographs, and they're about representation and bodies, especially of women of color or people of color. So with that in mind, I was kind of trying to think of how I could interact with the photographs, and I kind of started out by thinking of questions that I wanted to ask, these artists. And rather than writing out those questions or kind of like what they made me think, I wrote a poem that is imagined answers to questions that I imagine asking them. So I'll read that, and then I'll read another poem. And I have a couple different elements that I work with. I have some video projection and some music, so it's going to just be a little mix of things. So you guys can bear with me. And okay, can everyone hear me? Is that good? Okay, so I'll just start with the poems. Imagined answers to questions I imagine asking Wendy and Lorna. Renditions of body only. Renditions of dress. Incursions upon geography, yes, absolutely. Land or body, you take your pick. Honey, you can wear it whatever way you want to. Both, no doubt, are those different shades of yellow, yellow fever, treasure seeker. One interesting fact about hair is that it has sensation only at its roots. Otherwise, hair is dead. Hair is dead, but dead things carry significance. Red, the color of mist, answers. I think we have all felt the burden of explanations. We are all forms of devil or delicacy at times. My scars, from my father his eyes, my mother her hands, somewhere between the two perhaps. I wove them myself in a horizontal fashion. Yes, I am diametrically opposed. Scale is the aspect often cited in order to justify landscape photography. Landscape photography, you know the kind, with people standing in front of things or at the tops of high points. Men will prop an elbow on a knee when they reach a peak. All those women smiling obliviously, hands on hips, posing in front of decay. Pretty as a face behind which is then placed the maze. I think the whole concept of beauty is both unnatural and natural. Whose gaze now? Reappropriation? Well, maybe. Colonization was never a metaphor for us. It only hurts to cut it off if it meant something to you to wear it. Near to the disaster, as well, sometimes far from it, blindness lingers as part of the survival method. You decide if, when you're ready to forgive. Always, always aware of the approbation of words, their felicity, their dangerous captioning. So you used their language to trick them into hearing you. Many of us must reconfigure context, of course. But then there is still the old context to deal with. That is the technique of the chameleon. You get used to working alone. But there is no such thing as peripheral living, really, if you think about whose viewpoint it is from which you're supposed to be doing your living. Guilt is a long historical stream. The pain in the water is a given. Are you the water, or are you the rock that ruptures the silk of the water's surface? Perhaps you prefer to identify with the sediment. We all have our bird mythologies. Feathers and skins, ceremonies of hair, updo, redo, recount, discount. Are you looking for repair or despair? The photograph can be a body too, in a sense. It holds us, conveys us. No, the photograph is not a body. The photograph is not a skin. The camera's eye on the back of the subject's neck. Because we want you to ask yourself who you are when you are the seer. Okay. So in light of this week and the recent months, I'm sure there might be people that share sentiments about how challenging it's been, just kind of watching the events in society happen. I guess I'm going to read something that I wrote like shortly after the election. And should I just turn that, or you can just... This is called 11-8-16. Are you ready to get a little more comfortable with your uncomfort? I lay next to you, and in my body it will always hit different than in or for yours. In this world, I enact separation for the sake of spelling accurately the exposure, distance, unsung textures between your skin and mine. How to cultivate need not run, need not fear. Because I have felt alienated on most days. And so what? Stepping onto a stage is always an act of self-isolation. Violation, inviolate or inviolable. We self, we ensoul, we insulate, despite introversion, despite inversion, despite. Our art needs to count even more now. Because momentarily I had forgot white is the color of mourning in the culture of my birth, black the one for anniversaries and birthdays. You see how easily we shift our grief into complementary colors. Consciousness is not the same thing as instinct or emotion, heart maybe, which you place conveniently low in the body. In that space you frequently turn back to. White boys will always take it upon themselves to remove orange cones on their own impetus, thinking it all right to intimidate children into riding roller coasters when they don't really want to. I've always hated that. Body suggestions of perils to enjoy, levity at the cost of empathy. If you want anything from the body, if you fear anything of the body, then look first into the eyes. See how action does not occur before the unconsciousness of action. What are you ruled by? Why do you still wear it? I gleaned whiteness in a snow globe, in the dressed-up corpses of trees spied through Christmas night windows, in a land where snow is ecologically impossible, especially in April. They played the song about white dreaming to let the non-people know it was time to go. And in response, we were the ones who sought to die in our most ridiculous, naive dreams, die intelligently enough to be permitted to crawl inside. But our innocent flesh of living always gets in the way. Coming from so much death, how could we not know we are alive? I'm going to sing a song as part of this. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. See if this is okay. Did I? Okay. I actually don't need it for this one, but unless.
Next one? No, it's fine.
Yeah.
So just hit it, pick it up if you want it.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. So just as like a little bit of an introduction. The most recent book I wrote is called We Were Meant to Be a Gentle People, and it has a lot to do with Vietnam and kind of my heritage between two places, and it plays a little bit with some of the folk mythology like of the Vietnamese culture, and so this song plays a little bit on some of those mythic tropes, I guess. I call it Traveler's Ode. Let's see if this will work. Sometimes I see the future, and it looks alright to a man who's been waiting his whole long life to be returned to that land. It was not the somewhere. It was cold, but oh so bright, and everyone was happy there. I've memorized every promise that was gave on that night. We were told we'd have to go, and had better learn to travel light across the sea that would disappear once we'd reached its other shore. And there we'd wear our hearts inside, no longer easy for us to find. For we could not yet be beings of light, of wrong or right. Father, oh, now I know why you move so far away. But your poor mother, she waited for your return till her last day. Sometimes I'm mistaken for a flower, which is a thing to admire or possess, an impossessing kill, or at least watch die. Always it dies, not always watched. Friends would tell me, maybe it's your face that calls it to you. Open plate, blank slate, perfect distant porcelain regard, a perfect receptacle for break me, or I see you, or yes, I will smash the mirror myself. But this is just the art of trying to be spared the long open bar tab already waged by your parents to get here. In Texas, I learned you can't just belly up to the bar and order the first drink like that woman. This, the insidious order of things. Mistaken, I flower sometimes. Or other times for a rabbit, soft, furry, soundless, that type of suggestive little creature they just can't help but want to sink their claws into. On occasion, men have said things to me. I'm like an eagle. When I see a rabbit, I have to swoop in and snatch it up. I can't help it. It's just my nature. Or, there's just something in me that needs to explore the darker places. And then, I think perhaps you have that tendency in you too. And I understand these are invitations. I understand this is acknowledgement of the darker place they think I've come out of. I understand that one who calls himself an eagle He is walking down a long tunnel to reach me, all his prizes like a burden of wings on his back. I don't agree, I don't disagree. Flowers don't speak, and they are not expected to speak. Of course, flowers don't have mouths or voices. And would our ears even hear what kind of voice a flower might have if it did? Flowers could be constantly singing. In the same way that the eyes of some insects are designed to catch colors human eyes can't perceive, can't receive, pain has a similar dimensionality. A naked intruder once told me when I woke in the middle of the night to his presence by my bedside, "Does my nakedness bother you? These are just bodies. We're all just flowers." He said this in something like a tone of wonder, and then he took my pillow and covered himself with it and retreated to a chair in the dark of the kitchen. We are all just flowers, and hence possibly always singing unbeknownst to our own ears. I want to consider that our belief in the silence of the flower is a necessary tactic. It serves to emphasize both the efficiency and the tragedy of its acquisitor's violence. His genius power, his genius pain. Magnets do not snap without polarity. I'm thinking of that famous song, the one where the singer inhabits the voice of the colonizer, who is both tormentor and tormented, and the song makes us all, ironically, devastatingly, just want to dance. Consider, too, in positing that we must slow ourselves down to appreciate flowers, that they are something we must look for to the side of the path, we place the flower in the position of either digression or dalliance. And a digression exists only when one believes in its antonym, which is that a right course of action exists to be strayed from. Mid the jungle entrails of my birth warland, many years ago, the men who came there from the west were met by numerous digressions. It maddened them, for they had landed, believing their tanks had the power to cleave definite paths. Those men, I know, are not in and of themselves the ones to blame, for they were sent by a larger man. And how mystifying for them all, that despite the dropping of tonnage upon tonnage of munitions on that land, there continued to be something inside the soil, not to mention the people, that they could not extinguish. Flowers die, flowers recur. In some instances, you must surrender to navigate. It is a navigation of impassive capacities. To all the flowers in arms, if you were born there, somewhere in you, you understand this. focus down that part. Okay. All right. So I guess that's what I'm going to do live. And then there were a couple videos that I was going to show, which are actually on the screen behind you guys. So somewhere, maybe it's a lyric essay. It's called The Fragments, and it's in the book that I recently wrote, which is kind of an experimental memoir is what I'm calling it. It's got a lot of, like, part of the conceit of the book, I guess, is just that it has, like, you know, it combines a few different genres. This is a video poem, and it's actually also video that I've used in projection. So I've performed the poem, like, live, with the video projection kind of in this style. But I collaborated with a poet in Vietnam to translate this into Vietnamese. So I'm going to show the version in Vietnamese and then show it in English and see, I guess, what that experience is like for you guys to hear it in both languages, but the video will be the same. So we'll just watch it.
Những mảnh vỡ không đây chẳng đó, không gái chẳng trai, không trụ trần chẳng che đậy, không sắc chẳng cuộn, không vui chẳng buồn. Những mảnh vỡ không đồng thuận với nhau, với mi với chính họ, phần nhiều là thế. Những mảnh vỡ sẽ không giải thích gì với mi. Họ xoay những gương mặt sáng lóa ngây thơ hướng về mi. Mi nghĩ họ vô tội. Lúc khác, họ thao thức, nóng này, trái ngược. Họ nói rồi đổ vào lặng im khủng khiếp. Mộng thức thực sự họ có vẻ muốn theo, né tránh và duyệt cử. Khi mệt, họ đặt mình ngủ bất cứ chỗ đất nào. Họ sẽ nói mi nghe, bọn tao đến đầu tiên theo 2 đợt sóng cả, rồi theo những đợt sóng nhỏ hơn sâu lại, táp vào bờ. Đói. Những mảnh vỡ đưa cho mi những viên sỏi từ biển cả, một cách thức chạm đường để kể mi nghe. Bởi vì mặc định trong những vật thể này là sự thật về chính họ. Họ đã bị đánh bạt, xô dạt hết lần này lần khác bởi mẹ nước. Bởi thế họ biểu thị chính mình với sự thận trọng tới kỳ. Những mảnh vỡ sớm học cách bóp nghẹt những tiếng kêu đòi riêng tư ngây ngất. Họ loại trừ quá nhiều. Một mảnh này tôi biết đã có mẹ. Mảnh này cũng từng có 3 người cha. Không phải cùng một lúc đâu. Dĩ nhiên là thế. Những mảnh vỡ không dễ tin. Họ hiểu sự bất khả tín của tính cha và của lịch sử. Những mảnh vỡ này sẽ ám mi. Nhớ bọn ta, đừng nhớ bọn ta. Nhưng khi mi cố chỉ ra, khi mi cố chộp vai và nhìn vào mắt họ và nói, tôi thấy người, họ tháo rút gọn lẹ làm tăm. Hoặc đôi khi họ thét lên như những mắt gỗ. Bởi thế tôi đã học lịch sử riêng tôi trong những mảnh vỡ. Những mảnh vỡ trên tivi, ở trường, ở nhà. Những mảnh vỡ của một quê cũ. Tôi thẩm thấu những mảnh vỡ trong những hình ảnh đen trắng nhiễu hạt của cuốn phim dùng mòn xác, và qua những phản ứng tâm trạng quá khích của mẹ tôi để gom góp những điều không giải thích được. Như cuộc tranh luận của mẹ với chồng bà xảy ra sau khi chúng tôi xem phiên bản phim của vở nhạc kịch Tóc. Tôi đã sống cùng trong trí óc một người cha thực thụ đã chết trong suốt những năm tháng tuổi thơ, cho tới khi đột nhiên, khi tôi 13, ông được mang trở lại đời. Điều kỳ diệu không phải của sự phục sinh, mà của sự viết lại. Đã có một con đường chạy dọc chiều dài xứ sở những mảnh vỡ khởi sinh. Những mảnh vỡ rất nhiều đầu tiên đã trở thành những mảnh vỡ trên con đường đó. Họ từng bước lên con đường đó trong hy vọng hay tuyệt vọng, với những âm vọng của tình yêu hay tiếng sét trong lồng ngực. Họ biến sự đứt vỡ đó thành tiếng gọi của họ, con cái và cháu chắt họ nữa. Quá nhiều thứ làm tắc nghẽn con đường đó, rơi đổ xuống từ trên, tấn công tứ phía. Những mảnh vỡ bị tán vụn dưới chân bằng xe tăng, hỏa hoạn. Những cơn lũ lụt của những mảnh vỡ tháo chạy khác đang tới. Một lượng lớn lao xuống đường và đánh bật những đường tàu tốc hành vào các khu rừng và đầm lầy hai phía. Một vài mảnh thủng sâu mãi những đường hầm. Vài mảnh bám víu lấy những chiếc lá biến thành giấy, những đôi cánh nhanh chóng được cắt gọt và bay đi. Vài mảnh vỡ sau thất bại trên đường và sau khi gom lại đâu đó trong những ốc đảo mới, bắt đầu xếp hạng chính mình, những kẻ sống sót. Quên lãng hoặc nghĩ về họ rồi chỉ là những kẻ cuối sót lại. Nghĩ về họ tổng thể, thực tế, vài mảnh bắt đầu gọi chính họ là những câu chuyện. Lúc nào đó tôi đã không còn viết chuyện được nữa. Những mảnh vỡ có thể có tính kiến tạo khi ở tình trạng tự hủy, tự giải kiến tạo. Họ nhạo báng mi rằng mi tưởng mi biết hình dạng của mọi sự, rằng mi tưởng mi có thể biết được họ, mi tưởng mi đã hiểu thế giới này. Họ sẽ không nói thẳng rằng mi không thể.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. If you want to take any questions or
Sure, if people have questions. Yeah. Or comments.
come back together and maybe in this area.
Should I? Oh, I can come over here. Yeah. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah.
Where are the photos from that you used
In the video? Well, let's see. They're from different places. Some of them are like the ones that are going under the hexagram, the patterned, the broken. Those are mostly like just documentary, kind of common documentary images. And then also I threw in some shots from Hair. Have you guys seen that musical? So just kind of a mix of, from that era images. And then there's the shot of the road is actually like a reference to a certain incident that happened in 1972 in central Vietnam, and it kind of ties into my personal history. My mother ran a newspaper in Saigon, and there was this incident where basically the communists shelled this stretch of the highway, and a lot of, I think the number is something like 1,800, like civilians, who were fleeing on the road, just basically fleeing south, were, killed. And then that stretch of road, it sat like that for a couple of months. And that photograph is from when the journalists first came, were let into the area. And it kind of ties into pieces of my history because of just, it was a critical time in my mother and father's relationship also. And then just some of the other, I guess I was kind of tying in other images with the road. And then there's that one moving image at the end, which is an original image that I took when I went back to Vietnam in 2014. So, yeah.
A couple questions.
Yeah.
You use in the two versions,
Mm-hmm.
use different audio
Yeah.
underneath the the voices. I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Yeah.
And then also the hexagram.
Uh-huh.
I really liked it, and I was wondering about that.
Okay.
I have another question.
Okay. I like questions. So I don't actually speak Vietnamese. And I grew up with a Danish American father and a Vietnamese mother. And basically we were, you know, in order for us, he didn't want us to speak Vietnamese like growing up. So like the language has always been like kind of a barrier for me. So part of like my, you know, way of like dealing with this piece and like receiving the translation and the fact that I couldn't actually understand it, but I could see what the translator had written, like the translated Vietnamese version. So for me it was like kind of an exercise in like listening and like the rhythm of the language. And I actually laid the pieces so that the English and the Vietnamese words are actually lined up pretty exactly. And so there's those two tracks. And then I did it where I pulled the English language version forward for one, obviously, and then the Vietnamese for the other. And I guess my idea was that it could be something that, you know, you could listen to both languages at the same time simultaneously. Or if they were like on two speakers, you could like move to different parts of the room. And that was just like an experiment I wanted to play with, like how to, you know, experience that. And I guess it's kind of playing with translation and playing with like the sounds of the words as my entry point to trying to access. And then the hexagram. Do you guys recognize what hexagram? It's from the I Ching. Like, it's one that I liked in particular. It's the Wanderer. And there are connections to that. Just a lot of it is like, you know, for me, it's like connects to identity and searching. And my given Vietnamese name has like certain, like, it relates to this philosophy about wandering, or the phrase actually translates to like walking happily or traveling happily. And I liked the I Ching hexagram because it's basically about the wanderer, but it's also about the etiquette of traveling, where it's something about this counsel given about being small and being modest because you're in a place that you don't understand the customs of. And I thought that was just kind of pertinent as far as like the position of exile and drifting into other places. So that was kind of what I was playing with that shape. And yeah. Did you have another question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Much of what I know, like this era and the Vietnam War, is like very much from like American perspective, and all like basically all the stories and like all the narratives that I know of it are from that point.
Yeah.
You know? And so I was curious, like how you position yourself, maybe. It kind of, because in many ways, maybe I guess I'm curious, like, do you feel like you experienced it in that same way, or is it different for you? Like, sort of like these two mirrors, no?
I think it's both. I would say that, because I grew up, you know, in America, and I grew up, like, my access to, like, the war was really filtered through, the images of it especially were filtered through documentary and through cinema and through, so it's, you know, like thinking about the gaze and thinking about like the viewpoint that is like the most prevalent. Like it's definitely the American military masculine viewpoint, and it's kind of like Vietnam exists basically through that lens. Like in America, that's like how, you know, our identity exists, or how it's like defined, like in reaction to those circumstances. And so I've experienced that, and then like also just as a South Vietnamese refugee, there's a lot of like just the silence and like not having, you know, not seeing that narrative, the South Vietnamese like refugee narrative, really represented in mainstream culture, in literature, or movies for sure. And I don't, like, I feel like that's like something that still needs to be rectified, and we're all like working on it in a way. Like, it's just like we're trying to like give voice to it. And then I guess my particular interest, like, I guess I'm between places. Like, it's like this hybrid space is the best access that I have at this point, and then kind of acknowledging the ambiguity and the instability of the viewpoints is important to me, because obviously not, like, the one that dominates is not the only story. So I feel like, I guess as a writer, as an artist, maybe like that's kind of where I position myself in, like, I'll start there, like just trying to get that ambiguity, you know, or address it. And yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah.
It was really beautiful.
Thank you.
And as much as I was paying attention to your story, and it's incredibly interesting, but the cool thing about this work for me was it drew me into my own story too.
Okay, that's good.
And so it was interesting. My mom is from Northern Ireland. My dad's from Pennsylvania. So I was actually thinking a lot about, you know, my experience you doing this.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
One question for you.
Okay.
I thought it was really interesting that you chose work by two other artists who are working with, you know, not just strict photography.
Yeah.
Wendy Red Star.
Definitely.
So much media, and then
Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah.
Cultural quality. I think she's also done some video work, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious how you came to working with you know, using and employing so many different forms to
Yeah.
express the
Um,
work that you're doing.
Well, I have a little bit of a background in film. Like, I studied it initially, so I guess the visual element was interesting to me in that way, or has always been a part of how I see things. And I play music, and I've done that kind of simultaneously for a while, as like alongside being a writer. I think that it's always been like these separate things that I did, and then like at some point I started trying to merge them. I think it kind of came about as like a failure of being able to write like a novel in like a narrative fashion, or being able to write just text, like feeling like the story or whatever it is that I needed to express, like kind of didn't want to fit in just, you know, the form of like words on the page. So I guess it's just different, you know, ways of engaging the senses also is how I think about it. And the music, like there's an ethos to like that I could tap into, or I could try to, you know, tap into. And I guess that maybe gets away from like the fallibility of language, or like all the rhetoric that, you know, like can be problematic with ideologies and stories. So, yeah.
I was just going to ask a follow-up question in terms of being able to present this work out in the world. Like if you're a poet, you can do poetry readings. If you're a musician, you can play in traditional venues. But with work like this, I imagine it's more challenging.
It's,
in terms of, because you're working with so many potential audiences that don't always overlap.
Yeah.
Like how you're able to find space to present your work.
Yeah. Well, I think it's still ongoing,
Yeah.
like trying to figure that out. But you know, I do work on like things like like in the form of a book, like ultimately, like I would like the last thing I did was, you know, the main thing was like it's a book. You can read it as that, and then I guess there are these different ways of experiencing it, also, or pieces of it in multimedia format. So.
No other questions? No.
Well, thank you all for spending time.
And I have